Hi everyone. So today's discussion topic is responsive page layout. Before we had talked about page layouts. So what is the difference between page layout and responsive page layout? So in responsive page layout, uh, we particularly will talk about designing web pages with responsive layouts. That means the pages that will display well both on desktop and mobile browsers. So depending on whether you are using desktop or mobile browsers, actually these pages will be responsive. That means it will respond accordingly and it will view well in both or any kind of device, tablets, desktops, laptops, etc. So two of the main layouts that we'll be talking about, one of them is flexible box layout or Flexbox. The purpose of flexible box layout is to provide flexible and responsive layout, obviously. And this is important. This is best used for one dimension, a row or a column. So a few things. First, let's go through these few things and then I will show you example and then those things will make sense. So first of all, to make a flexible box layout, we need a CSS property that is a display property. And the value for the display property is going to be flex. Okay. So this is the important thing. So this is a starting point of creating a flexible box layout. And then once we apply this like design rule to any element, that one becomes a flex container. Okay. So a flex item is any child element within a flex container. Okay. So that's the second thing. There's too much information going on, but all of these will make sense once we actually go through the example. Then comes the flex wrap property. This is another property which determines whether the flex items are displayed on multiple lines. So far, three things. We need display property with a value of flex. And then once that rule is applied to any HTML element, that becomes a flex container. And anything within the flex container is a flex item. And then there is another property, wrap property, determining whether the flex items are displayed on multiple lines. Okay. And the values for the flex wrap property are going to be either no wrap or wrap reverse. And then let's remember another property, which is flex direction. So the value is either row reverse, or column reverse. Okay. So once we create a flexible box layout, it will look like this. So say this is a flex container, right? There's a gray area. This is the flexible container. So that means uh, the design that says display value is flex is applied on this. Inside that you see flex items, and the flex direction here is row. So that means the items are actually side by side in one row. Okay, so the uh, main axis goes direction wise and the cross axis goes against the direction. So this is a flex container with flex direction row. Okay, next, let's look at another flex container, this time with flex direction column. So here you see we again have like three flex items, but this time the items are actually in the same column because the flex direction is column. And the main axis is goes towards the direction of the column, and toward the direction of the row goes the cross axis. Okay, so let me show you some examples. So this is okay. So let me show you some examples. Okay, so here goes your first example. You see here we have inside the main, we have, say, div elements like multiple images, right? And these images are actually put side by side. Okay, so if we go to inside the style, you see here that there is a ID selector, so hash gallery. And this one uses the display property with the value of flex. Okay, so this is the design rule with ID selector. Now that one is applied to this div element. You see that? That means inside everything becomes flex item. So everything becomes flex item. Okay, so here is the first example on how you create flex box, uh, how you flexible box layout, how you create flexible box layout. So first you create a design rule with display property with the value of flex, and then we apply that rule on an element, and inside that element everything becomes now a flex item. Okay, so there goes our first example, and here you see, look at, if you want to find the file, look at the address here, keep an eye on the address here. It's inside the folder. Obviously I'm going to give you all the examples. So the file name is flex1.html. Okay, so next next you see the same thing, but the difference here is, if I now this one becomes like multiple rows, so this one changes, whereas the first one here things were not changing. So you see everything was in one row, but this is even more flexible and dynamic. So what changes did we make? So here is a change. This one uses flex wrap property, and the flex wrap property, the value is wrap. Okay, so that means depending on the display area, the flex box now, the flex items now wrap around. So you see it's wrapping around, uh, making sure that everything is visible in the display area. So the only difference here is, in the previous one, we didn't have anything. So the design rule didn't have any uh, particular property with how to wrap or not. But this one uses flex hyphen wrap, and the value for that is wrap. So that's the second thing. Okay, so let's go back. Let's now talk about another property, that is the justify content property. So this CSS property defines, configures how the extra space along the main axis. So remember, the main axis depends on the direction, like flex direction property, right? So we haven't, if the flex direction is row, the main axis is across the row, right? Okay, so justify content property configures how the extra space along the main axis should be displayed. So let me show you the example here. Here you see that we have this. Okay, so let's go to this example. So, okay, so here you see this, right? The same pictures in different ways, displayed in different ways, right? Okay. So let's go to the, so you see here, there are actually multiple rules, 5 rules defined, 5 of the rules. This is important. Gallery 1, all of them are like ID selector. That means all of these rules can be applied only to one element. So each of these rules is going to be applied to one HTML element. So first rule says, obviously display flex, background, there's a background color. These two are common in all of them. And the flex direction in all of them are also row. So these first 3 are common. The final one, just justify content, that value is different. So first one says the justify content value is flex start. That means everything would be, so this is the main axis, right? So everything is going to be all the flex items are going to start at from the start. Flex start, right? That's the value. So, okay, let me show you the here. So here you see like we have like 5 developments. Okay, 5 developments. So this is the third one, this is the fourth one, this is the fifth one. We have 5 developments, and each of them have the same pictures inside it, same images. Okay. The difference is the first development takes the design gallery 1, the second development takes gallery 2, gallery 3, gallery 4, gallery 5. Okay. Now the gallery 1 rule says the justified content is from the start. The second rule says justified content is flex, the value for that is flex end. So you see all the contents across the main axis goes to the end, right? Third one says justify content is center, so everything is centered. Then fourth one says justify content is a space between, so you see there is a space between the flex items, right? And the space is like if you just, yeah, so it is being very dynamic, right? You see it's being very dynamic, right? Everything, whatever you do, this one remains in center. Whatever you do, like there is some space, but depending on how your view area or display area is, this space increases. Okay. And the final one, it says space around. So you see space around. That means in the previous one, there was space between, but this is also has a space around. This is the final one. Okay. Okay. So, and obviously now we have also seen flex direction, row. Okay, so this one, so here, this one, you see that there is a rule, display flex. Flex direction is row, flex wrap is wrap, so it's wrapping around, right? And justify content is a space around. So you see on the left and right, there is a space. Okay, so you see now, if I increase my display area, so it first fills up the first row, and then after that, it fills up the next one. And this in the second row, you see, uh, since the rule says justify content is a space around, so even if there are like 2 elements, there is space on the left, right, and then a space in the middle. Okay, if I do this now, it creates 3 rows, 2 rows, still 2 rows, but more items in the first row. Let's change this to flex direction to column. Let's see what happens. Okay. Yeah, so now becomes 1 column. Yeah, it becomes now just one column, one single column. You see that? And justify content is space around, so there is space in the top, there's space in the bottom, and space in the middle. Now the main axis is just a vertical, because main axis is uh, always towards the direction of the flex direction, right? Okay. Okay, so next, there are some other CSS properties, the align items properties. This one configures how the browser displays extra space along the cross axis, right? Um, then flex flow. This is a shorthand for flex direction and flex wrap property. So you see, like we had used like 2 of them, right? Flex direction and flex wrap. If you use these flex flow property, then you can, this is a shorthand of both. So it will take 2 values. The first value is for the direction, and the second value is whether to wrap or not. And then there is another property, the order property. It causes the browser to display flex item in different orders than they were coded. So this is an important one. I'm going to show you an example, but before that, let's move a little bit ahead, and then I am going to show you examples. So yeah, So this is a, a flex property. So by now we know about the flex items. Whatever is in the flex container is a flex item. For example, as I said, like here we have a rule, right? We have a rule gallery, which has this display property and the value of flex. Okay, so whatever item here takes the design from these gallery rule. So you see this div item takes the design from the gallery rule, right? So this div item becomes a flex container. Now inside this flex container, we have flex items, right? 1, 2, 3, all these are like flex items. Now there is a property, flex property, which configures the flex items. What it does is it customizes the sizes of each flex item, indicated the flex grow factor, flex shrink factor can be used to indicate proportional flexible items. So here is one thing, let me show you. Here we see all the flex items are of the same size, but using the flex property, we can change the proportional size of the flex items. I am going to show you an example. So here you see that this is say a flex container, and inside this flex container we have these flex items, nav, main, and aside. Now you see these flex properties used, and 1, 7, 2, these are the values. So these are the proportion of the values. That means if this one has a width of 1, this one will have a width of 7, this is going to have a width of 2. So the proportion is going to be 1:7:2. Okay. So let me show you one example. Yeah, so this is an example of where we are going to use flex order. So first of all, you see inside the style, we have a rule with ID selector named content, where the display property value is flex. Okay, so now if I go inside my body, you see we have a div item where uh, it actually takes the design, right? Gets the design from this design rule. So this div item now becomes a flex container. Now inside this flex container, we have like 3 items: a nav element, a side element, and main element. Okay. So this is important. So you see we have 3 items: first, second, third. Now here's the thing. You see the first item is on the left, the second item is on the right, whereas the last item, main, is in the middle. Now, two things, like if they were like, they should have been displayed in order, right? But why this one is first, that is fine. But why this is third instead of second, right? And why this is third instead of second, and why this is second, main, instead of being third, although it's coded third. Let's take a look at this one. So first of all, you see these rule nav. Oh, okay, so two things. First, you see for the nav area, uh, the flex says none. For the main, the flex value is 6. And for the side, flex value is 4. So this is the proportional value. So if this one has a width of 4, the side, the main will have a width of 6. And then again, for the nav, the order property is used, and it has a value of 1. Main has a value of 2, and aside has a value of 3. That's why we see the nav area in the left, and then we see the main, and then we see the aside. So using the order property, you see here. So using the order property, it causes the browser to display flex item in different order than they were coded, right? The second one went to the third, and the third one came to the second. So using the order property, we just reversed their like order of the display. And then There is this flex property also, which the value of which actually indicates the proportionate size. If this was not used, now all of them would have just the same width. Okay, it wouldn't have 1:7:2. Okay, so there goes our discussion about flexible box layout. Next, we are going to talk about grid layout. And as the name suggests, the grid layout is used to create grid-like layout. So in a grid, we have rows and columns. The first thing to remember is in the previous discussion for flexible box layout, we used the display property with the value of flex. Now this time for a grid layout, we'll be using the same display property, but the value is going to be grid. Okay. Once this design rule is created, now that design is acquired by some HTML element, and that one becomes a grid container. Now inside a grid container, we will have like elements, right? Those elements are going to be grid item. So it's a child element of a grid container. So you'll see grid line, grid row. We'll just go through those examples and show you. Okay, so here you can see a design of a grid with 3 columns and 2 rows. Okay. So this is very important. How do you create columns and rows? Using the lines. So to create 2 rows, we need 3 lines. These are horizontal grid lines. To create 3 columns, we need 4 vertical lines. Okay, so this is important. Okay, so that means to create grids, we need to tell the browser where does the first line for the column is, where this is the second line, right? Or we can say it can be translated as what is the width of the first column, what is the width of the second column, what is the width of the third column. Similarly, what is the width of the first row, what is the width of the second row. Okay, so here is it. Uh, so the property that we use to mention how many columns are there is grid template columns. You see it has 3 values, which means that it says like there'll be 3 columns, each of them with the width of 220 pixel. And then there is going to be 2 rows, each of them with the width of or with height of 170 pixels. So 2 properties, grid template columns, right? And grid template rows. So this is important. If we had like a third value here, that would have meant that we have 3 rows. Okay, so let me show you a basic grid. Okay, so this is a basic grid. And then okay, so before we go there, let me show you this. So you see these values were in pixels, right? We can use different units. As you remember in one of the previous lectures, for the text, we said like different units we can use. We can also use a percentage, right? And then flex factor unit, different things. So I'm going to, or in the example we showed you this numeric length unit pixel. Where if it was a percentage of the display area, we could have say like 20%. We could just use auto, right? In that case, it will be automatically determined. So yeah, so let me show you an example. Okay, so here is my example. Yeah. So inside the head, you see we have this style element, and inside that we have like a design or CSS rule with ID selector, gallery, display property value is grid. So we are starting a grid layout, and grid template columns is 220, 220, 220. Rows is like 2 rows with this. So this is the same thing that I showed you in the slides, right? Now you see this design has been, this CSS rule is applied on this div element. So this div element now becomes a grid layout, and each of these are like grid elements, right? Now let's go to another example. So again, look at this all the time to identify where your file, where you can find this file. So it's within the chapter and within the folder 7.3, and the file name is index.html. Okay, so this one here you see it's almost the same. The only difference is here it says grid gap is 2, and this is like an unit, EM unit. Okay, so for this one, you see in the previous one, the gap was always fixed, right? And for this one, it has even a bigger gap. Very careful look at this. It has a bigger gap. So this had a smaller gap, now it has doubled. The gap has doubled because we have used this grid gap property. Okay, so yep. Okay, so here is an important thing that I'm going to show you now. As you can see here in the example here, all the columns and columns have, or all the grid items, I should say grid items, have a similar measurement. It's the same width. So how do I change them? So here, for example, let me show you here. You see here, this page has like uh, 2 columns. This is line 1, line 2, line 3, right? 2 columns and 3 rows because there are 4 lines, 4 horizontal lines. Now, the first column is like not as wide as the second column. Whereas for the rows, the first and the last row is like thinner, and the middle row is like fatter. Now, how did we configure this, right? So let's show you the technique. Uh, and not only that, okay. So also just say, let's look at this one. So this one has 160 pixel height. This one has 1 FR width, and this one is auto height. Oh, okay. So this is 160, this is auto. And this column is 150 wide, and this is, okay, so how do we configure this? And the second one is like grid line number. So you see there are like 3 vertical lines and 4 horizontal lines. So these lines are very important because these lines are actually virtually creating the grid. So the line numbers are important. So let's very carefully look at this example. So this one says the header element. Okay, so this is the property, grid row property and grid column property. Okay. So this is very important, grid row property and grid column property. So now you see grid row property says that the header element is going to be between line 1 and 2. Okay. The nav element is going to be between line 2. This is row wise, and line 3. The main element is between line 2 and line 3. The footer element is between line 3 and line 4. Now, if I go back, you see the header element is between line 1 and line 2. The nav element is between line 2 and line 3. The main element is also between line 2 and line 3. And the footer element is between line 3 and line 4. Okay. So that makes total sense, right? Now you see there goes the elements. And now the grid column. Now tell me what is the header element? The header element is between line 1 and line 3, right? The nav element is between line 1 and line 2. The main element is between line 2 and line 3. And the footer element is between the column line 1 and column line 3. Okay, so that's exactly the column line 1 and column line 3. That is the footer element. Okay, so that's very interesting. So let me show you an example. So let's look at this one. So here you see that we have this design rule wrapper, which says the display property value has a grid, and the grid template column is, you see we have two columns, right? The first one has 150 pixel, the second column is the rest of the width, and grid template rows. So we have 3 rows. So 2 columns, 3 rows. Okay. Now the header says it's between line 1, the row line 1 and 2. So here nav main footer. So we have defined which element goes within which row line and which column line. Okay. And then once the div element or any element takes the design from this wrapper, then everything inside is now following that. You see, this is between line 1 and 2, and between column line 1 and 3. See that? So that's exactly we create different elements in different sizes. So grid line, that's the property that's playing, sorry, grid row and grid column. Those are the two properties that are playing the role here. Okay, so there goes your grid layout. Now, another thing, let's talk about grid area property. Okay, so grid area is kind of, you can say we are creating a alias. So if you create a rule like this, then you can use these words to identify this. Let me show you the example. Suppose you created some design rules like this. So now using the grid area property, you can use those names. Okay, so here in very carefully look at this rule. How many columns we have? 1, 2. How many rows we have? 1, 2, 3. So that means 2 columns and 3 rows. Okay, 6 grid cells. This one says, now can you see the 6 grid cells here? Now this one says the first cell will be header. The second cell is going to be header. The third cell is going to be nav. Fourth one is main. Fifth one is footer. Sixth one is footer. Clear? Okay. So exactly like this. You see there are like 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. First one is header. Second one is header. Third one is nav. Fourth one is main. Fifth one is footer. Sixth one is footer. Clear? Okay, so which property we used? Once we use this property with the value of main, now this is an alias. This main is an alias. So this main is actually put here. So now it says, oh, okay, the alias is main, so I'm going to use the main area. So just for example, if I had put say main, instead of this, if I had put main one, I had to do this thing like main one. Okay. Okay, so grid template areas. You understood this? So this is so previously you see we had used grid template columns, grid template rows, grid template areas. So instead of that, we could just use one property, grid template. This is the shorthand property. And inside that, you put everything. So you put 3 columns. So this is column, 3 columns in the first row, 3 columns in the second row, 3 columns in the third row. That means we have 3 rows. Okay. And then it says the first row has a width of height of 100 pixel. The last row has a height of 50 pixel. And the middle row is auto. So you see here is 100, it's 50, and the middle is auto. Okay. Next, we put a slash and then we put 150, 30%, and the middle. So if we go here, this is 150, and this is the auto. Okay. So let me take a look at what this 30% mean. Okay, so there is 3 columns. So yeah. So the third column is takes 30%. So this is not the exact representation. So this is for a different design. Let me see if I have that design. So this one has 3 rows. So this is 7.4. Let me check if we have anything in 7.5. So here, so we have, yeah, we have grid area for header, nav, main, and then we have, yeah, so this one, here is, so we have like 3 columns, 3 rows, 1, 2, 3, and 3 columns, 1, 2, 3. Okay. Now let's look at 7.6. I think it would show me the shorter way. Control Shift I. So this time you see we have like, so yeah, this is the one. So we use this grid template, and then we say like first cell is header, second cell is, so header, 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 nav, main, aside, footer, footer, footer. Okay, so that's it. And instead of 30%, then here we are putting like 300 pixel, and in the middle, rest of the middle is 1. Okay, so whatever you do, this one now becomes 300 pixel. Okay, so there goes the grid template. Now let's look at one example where we center a thing with the flexbox. So what we do here is we use this property, justify content center and align item center. And this one is for the header. So here in this page, you see the header is centered here, the header element. So using the justify content property, we just mirror this and the heading becomes here. Okay. Okay, so next let's talk about a very important thing, viewport meta tag. This is very important to view any website on mobiles. So the viewport meta tag, it was created as an Apple extension to configure display on mobile devices. It configures the width and the initial scale of the browser viewport. So this is how you create a viewport meta tag. You create a meta element where the name property, attribute. So this is an HTML thing, so not property. Attribute name attribute value is viewport, and then content value is width. Okay, there is nothing for that. Okay, for the content, its width is device width and initial scale is 1. So if you put this, now you're initiating a viewport meta tag. I am going to show you the example here. So how this is used. Okay, so let me show you the example of viewport meta tag, how powerful this is. Okay, so okay, let's take a look at this one. So here you see inside the head, we have created this viewport meta tag. Okay. And then once you did that, after that, what you did is you see this, all of this is like inside the head, right? Okay, so inside the head, we created a viewport meta tag. That's important. And then in this style, let's see in this style, what did we do? Okay, so this is the media query. So once we create this viewport meta tag, down the media query is going to work. And this is how we actually create media queries. At media. And then we say like mean width is 600 pixel. So if the width of the display is minimum 600 pixel, then all these rules are going to be applied. So this is for medium display, right? So all these rules are going to be applied for the nav area, for the main area, for the side area. But if the mean width is 124 pixel, now these rules are going to be applied, okay? And if, yeah, so the medium display, and then we talked about, so this is how you, once you have a viewport meta tag here, now you can do media query inside the design. Depending on the width, the nav area size, everything changes. Okay, so initially you see we have a nice width, okay, very nice width. So that means the nav area has a different design, main has a different design, and side has a different design. Now once the width reduces, now it does the media query and says, oh, okay, now I have a medium width. So let's change this. You see, it's now changed. Initially, the nav area was on the left, main was in the middle, and the other one aside was on the side. Now the nav goes on the top, right? You see that? You see the nav area, it has changed its position. And the main goes to the left and the aside comes to the right. Let's reduce this even further. Now you see what happens. Now it looks like a mobile phone. Because the browser is always doing the media query for a page that has viewport meta tag. And then depending on the width of the area, the design rules change. So you see here, this is the rule for a side, right? So it will be take the 55% of the left if the width is like small. But if the width is big, it will take, there is nothing mentioned about that side. But for the nav area, you see the nav area changes, right? Depending on whether it's short width or long width, the nav area changes. Okay, so that was very briefly about the viewport meta tag and how we do media query. Next, let's talk about the flexible images. This is very important, how we can make flexible images. So in CSS, we used to do this max width, height. We don't need this. Using media queries or these HTML elements, now we can actually, depending on what is the, we can, depending on what is the area of the view area or what is the width of the browser, now we can select what kind of, which image we want to select. Okay, so this is how you configure this whole thing. Inside the picture element, we have like, we have put 3 images, but not all of them are going to be displayed together. If the min width is 1200 pixel, then this image is going to be displayed. If the min width is 800, this is going to be displayed. If the mm, if the screen is very small, then the small JPG is going to work. Okay, let me show you here. Okay, so this is from 7.11. Let me show you 7.11. So you see we have like 3 images, large, and then we have medium. Okay, so we have small and we have medium. This is the same thing with the small size. Okay, so if I go here, you see here that inside the picture element, there are like 3. Okay, and it uses this attribute media. And this one actually asks if the min width is 1200, then it will show large.jpg. So let you see, let's make it even bigger. You see that? Now it's more than 1200 pixels and the large.jpg appeared. Next, if this area is medium, then medium.jpg is going to be displayed. If I make the view area very small, it will show the small.jpg. Okay. So this is how we can use media query even for resizing images. Okay, so once you have created your web page, you should always test how this one looks on your mobile, because most of the time probably you are doing the development on desktop or laptop and it may look very nice, but it's important that it also looks nice on a mobile phone. That's why I showed you this, right? I showed you this, that this page looks very nice on a desktop or a tablet or a mobile phone. So to do those checks, there are different emulators online, Opera, Google, iPhone emulator. You can just use any of them to see how your page looks. Okay, and this is how a page, just an example on how a page should look on mobile phone. Okay, so the summary, today we introduced you to the modern layout techniques which configures responsive web page that displays well both on desktops and mobile devices. So that's it. Thank you very much. We'll come back with another lecture.